There's something about small towns that makes the strange feel even stranger. Maybe it's the silence, the isolation, or the way stories linger in the air a little longer than they should. Tonight, you'll hear 3 unsettling true experiences from people who lived in the countryside, far from cities, neighbors, or even explanation. These stories aren't about ghosts you see in movies. They're about the kind of quiet terror that settles deep in your bones. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. And whatever you do, don't look out the window. Something was living behind our barn. Story 1, Daniel's account. My name is Daniel. I'm 31 now, but this happened when I was 18. I grew up in a very small rural town. Not the kind you see in movies with a main street and diners. I'm talking about a place with less than 200 people, where everyone knows each other's dogs by name. Our house sat on a few acres surrounded by fields, some woods, and only one neighbor within walking distance. The kind of quiet you only get in places like that is hard to describe, comforting during the day, oppressive at night. Our property had an old barn that my father used mostly for tools and storing firewood. It had 2 levels, the top being a loft with some broken down furniture and things left behind by the previous owners. It always gave me a weird feeling, but I'd never say I was scared of it. Not until that fall. It started with noises. At first, I thought it was an animal, raccoons or maybe a stray dog. Scratching sounds. Light footsteps. One night I was out late chopping wood when I heard something shuffle behind the barn. I called out, thinking maybe it was our dog, but he came running from the opposite direction. When I checked behind the barn, there was nothing there. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. We'd find the barn door slightly open in the mornings, even after my dad started locking it with a metal latch from the outside. Once, we found deep scratch marks on the inside of the wooden door, like something had been trying to get out. My dad thought maybe a bear had gotten in somehow, but there were no broken boards or obvious holes. And the barn always smelled weird when it happened. Not like an animal, something musty, like wet earth and metal. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on gravel. I looked out my bedroom window, which faced the back field. The moon was bright enough that I could see most of the yard. That's when I saw someone, or something, standing by the barn. They weren't doing anything. Just standing still, facing the door. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but it was almost 2 a.m., and no one around us ever showed up without calling. I grabbed my flashlight and went downstairs quietly, trying not to wake my parents. But by the time I got outside, whoever, or whatever, it was gone. No footprints in the frost. No sound of someone walking away. Just that same smell in the air. Stronger this time. I told my dad the next day, and he decided we needed to check the loft again. He and I went up there that afternoon. There was a pile of blankets and old clothes shoved into the corner. It looked like someone had been sleeping there. There were also empty cans of food, some we recognized from our own pantry. And a small mirror hanging on the wooden beam by a rusty nail. But the worst thing was a notebook. It was filled with drawings. Pages and pages of eyes. Some big, some small, all of them open and staring. There were no words, just those eyes. My dad burned everything. He didn't even hesitate. We didn't talk about it again. He changed the lock on the barn and kept his shotgun loaded for weeks. But that wasn't the end. 2 nights later, I woke up again. Same sound, gravel crunching. I looked out the window and saw nothing at first. Then, slowly, from behind the barn, something stepped out. It wasn't a person. I don't know how to describe it without sounding crazy. It was tall, but it moved in this crooked, jerky way, like it didn't understand how joints work. It stopped in the middle of the yard and looked straight up at my window. Even from that distance, I swear I could feel it seeing me. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. I just stared back. Then it walked off into the woods. We never saw it again after that. My dad eventually sold the barn and had a new shed built closer to the house. But I still think about it. and I still remember the last page in that notebook. It was just one eye, bigger than the others. And underneath it, scratched in tiny letters, it said, "It watches when you sleep." The Boy in the Window. Story 2, Olivia's Account. My name is Olivia, and I grew up in a small rural town where most homes were spread far apart, often separated by thick woods or long gravel roads. When I was a teenager, we lived in a modest one-story house with a big front porch and only 2 neighbors nearby, one of them being an older couple who rarely left their home, and the other being an abandoned house that had been empty for years. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect something terrifying to happen. It was quiet. Peaceful, even. The kind of place where the most excitement was hearing coyotes at night or the occasional deer wandering into your yard. I was 16 when this happened. It was early winter, cold enough that the windows frosted on the inside by morning. I had the habit of staying up late in my room, listening to music or journaling. My window faced the side of the house, toward the tree line and the old abandoned house next door. One night, I was getting ready for bed. It must have been close to 2 a.m. I turned off my lamp and slid under the covers, but before I could close my eyes, I felt it. You know when someone's watching you? That horrible weight of a stare pressing in? That's what I felt. I turned my head slowly to the window. There was a boy standing outside. He was maybe 10 or 11. Barefoot, wearing only what looked like an oversized shirt. His skin looked pale, almost bluish in the moonlight, and he was just standing there, staring into my room with this completely blank expression. Not scared. Not angry. Just empty. I screamed. My parents came running. My dad grabbed his rifle and went outside while my mom stayed with me. I kept pointing at the window, trying to explain what I saw, but when my dad came back in, he said there was no one out there. No footprints in the frost. No signs of a kid running away. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I refused to go to school. I stayed home and kept glancing toward that window. By afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself I had dreamed it, until I went outside. On the outer windowsill, pressed into the frost, were 2 small handprints. Perfectly shaped. Too small to be an adult's. That same night, it happened again. I had fallen asleep early, out of pure exhaustion. Around midnight, I woke up gasping. Like someone had whispered right in my ear. My room was freezing, even though the heater was on. I sat up and immediately looked toward the window. The boy wasn't there. But this time, he was inside the house. I saw him standing in the hallway, just barely visible in the shadows through the crack of my open door. Same blank face. Same cold, staring eyes. I screamed again. My dad searched the whole house. Nothing. Every door was locked. No signs of forced entry. But this time, he believed me. He could see how terrified I was. He boarded up my window and kept the hallway light on at night for weeks. We considered calling the police, but what would we even report? A ghost? A few days later, we talked to the older couple who lived on the other side of the woods. I don't know what prompted my dad to bring it up, but when he mentioned what I saw, the woman went quiet. Then she told us something I'll never forget. Years ago, a boy went missing from the abandoned house next door. It had been a foster home, briefly, before being shut down due to neglect. The story went that a young boy had run off into the woods and was never found. They searched for days, but no trace of him was ever discovered. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that what I saw was him. But it didn't stop. Every winter, for the next 2 years, I'd see him. Never closer. Never farther. Always standing. Always watching. Until one year, he stopped coming. The following spring, the house next door was torn down. But even now, I keep my curtains closed at night. Especially in the winter. Because every so often, I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sure that someone is staring through the glass. The sound under the floor. Story 3, Caroline's Account. My name is Caroline. I'm 43 now, but this happened when I was 25, shortly after I moved into a house I inherited from my grandmother. She had lived there for decades, alone, in a wooden house deep in the countryside. I'm talking about one of those houses you have to drive down several miles of dirt road just to get to. The kind of place where, at night, it feels like the darkness itself is alive outside your windows. As a kid, I loved visiting. It always felt cozy, safe. But living there alone as an adult was different. At first, it was just sounds. And I know, old houses make noise. Wood expands, wind slips through cracks. But the sounds I heard weren't like that. They came from beneath the floor. Like something crawling through the dirt under the house. It started subtly. A shuffle. A light thump here and there. But then it became more deliberate. Heavier. It always happened around 2 or 3 a.m. I'd be lying in bed, eyes closed, and I'd feel it more than hear it, footsteps. Not in the hallway. Not on the porch. Under the house. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe a possum. But the steps were slow, spaced out. Like someone trying not to make a sound, but failing. One step, then pause. Another, then pause. I had a guy come check for animals under the house. He crawled around down there, checked every corner, and said he found nothing. No droppings. No holes. Not even signs of burrowing. But I knew what I heard. And that wasn't all. I started noticing little things around the house. The remote would be on top of the fridge. The bathroom light would be flipped on, even when the bulb had burned out. Once I found the attic hatch slightly open, even though I never used it. The scariest moment came one night when I woke up to a loud bang. It sounded like it came from right under my bed. The wooden floor literally shook. I sat up, heart pounding, and just listened. There was silence. The kind of silence that feels loaded. Like something's waiting. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to the cellar access hatch. That's how you get beneath the house. I opened it, climbed down, and pointed the beam around. Everything looked normal, until I reached the far corner. There was a hole. It had been dug recently, fresh, wet dirt all around it. It was narrow, only a few feet deep. It didn't go anywhere. It was like something had dug in, not out. I backed out quickly. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I called my mom. She was quiet while I explained what was going on. Then she said, very softly, "You heard it too, didn't you?" I asked her what she meant. She told me that years ago, when she was younger and still lived there, my grandmother would mention the crawling sound. That's why she always kept the radio on at night. She said it made the noises go away. That night, I left the radio playing static. It worked for a while. Until the night it didn't. I woke up to silence, and then a creaking sound. But this time, it wasn't coming from under the floor. It was inside the room. I sat frozen in bed. I could hear wood creaking, slowly, like someone shifting their weight. It was near the closet. I didn't look. I couldn't. There was a smell in the air, damp earth and something metallic. After that, I locked my bedroom door every night. I sold the house a month later. I never told the new owners anything. But sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, expecting to hear that slow dragging noise beneath me, waiting, getting closer. Whether you're someone who lives far from everyone else, or just like hearing about those who do, remember this. The scariest things don't always come with a warning. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And don't forget to lock your doors, especially if you live in the middle of nowhere.